Alvin Karpis was a Depression-era gangster who literally shot to fame as co-leader of the trigger-happy Barker-Karpis gang in 1930s America. Known as Creepy due to his sinister smile and Ray to his fellow gang members, Karpis was one of only 4 men ever to be dubbed Public Enemy Number 1. And he was the only one who was taken alive. He also had the distinction of being the longest-serving prisoner in Alcatraz. In later life, he came back into the public eye, partly due to a bizarre connection to Charles Manson. Karpis was born in Montreal in 1907 to Lithuanian immigrant parents, but was raised in Topeka, Kansas. He started in crime age 10, selling pornography and associating with gamblers, bootleggers, and pimps. By 1926, Karpis had received a 10-year sentence at a Kansas state reformatory. He promptly escaped with his new partner in crime, Lawrence Duvall. Embarking on a year-long crime spree that was only interrupted by Duvall's recapture, Karpis was himself eventually apprehended whilst attempting to steal a car. Landing this time in Kansas State Penitentiary, he met Fred Barker, leader of the Bloody Barkers gang, as they had been dubbed in the newspapers. A new alliance was formed. Fred's brothers, Herman, Lloyd, and Doc, had previously completed the gang, but Herman had killed himself after a shootout. Doc was doing life for a murder in 1920, and Lloyd got 25 years in 1922 for mail theft. Only the infamous Ma Barker was left on the outside, although her involvement in criminality was a media myth. She limited herself to organizing publicity and lobbying campaigns that pestered politicians and parole boards for her son's release. In his memoirs, Alvin wrote, "Ma was always somebody in our lives, somebody we looked after and took with us when we moved city to city, hideout to hideout. She just didn't have the know-how to direct us on a robbery, and we always made it a point of only discussing our scores when Ma wasn't around." Upon Karpis' release in 1931, he joined up with Fred, and they also released Doc, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They put together the gang, and immediately got to work. On December the 19th, 1931, Karpis and Fred Barker killed Sheriff C. Roy Kelly, who was investigating their robbery of a store in West Plains, Missouri. The gang fled to St. Paul, Minnesota. Laying low till 1933, they then kidnapped William Ham, a millionaire Minnesota brewer, releasing him after a $100,000 ransom was paid. They then abducted St. Paul banker Edward Brenner, this time receiving a $200,000 ransom for his release. However, Brenner's father was a friend of President Roosevelt, who applied pressure to J. Edgar Hoover for the FBI to show results. Hoover created so-called flying squads of the best FBI agents, tasked with hunting down the leading public enemies. In 1934, they closed the book on a host of notorious criminals, resulting in the deaths of John Dillinger and Babyface Nelson, among others. The FBI flying squads knocked off Ma and Fred Barker in a shootout on January the 16th, 1935, then located Karpis in Atlantic City shortly afterwards. Karpis and an accomplice shot their way out, though Karpis' pregnant girlfriend was hit by a stray bullet. She survived and successfully delivered Alvin's child while he was on the run. There's lots more to come in this video, but please consider subscribing, and please consider supporting my work with a PayPal donation. The link is in the description. Thank you. Karpis continued on a crime wave that included a rare train robbery that netted him $27,000. He was even rumoured to have sent a death threat to Hoover, though in his memoirs he dismissed this as a publicity invention by the FBI. On the 1st of May 1936, Karpis was again located by the FBI, this time in New Orleans. Hoover flew in, wanting to personally make the arrest. Shortly after 5 p.m. on the 2nd of May, as a dozen or so agents swarmed Karpis' car, Hoover announced to Karpis that he was under arrest, grabbing his arm before he could reach a rifle in the back seat. At least, this was the FBI version, putting Hoover in a heroic light. In his memoirs, Karpis' version was much different. He stated that Hoover only approached the car for his glory moment after he had been given the all clear, and further pointed out that his car didn't have a back seat. Whatever the truth of the matter, the arrest was a major moment, signalling the end of the big-name Depression-era criminal. Brought to trial at St. Paul Federal Courts Building, Karpis initially pleaded not guilty. 2 weeks later, he offered through his attorney, Thomas Newman, to plead guilty to a charge of conspiracy in the Brenner kidnapping if kidnapping charges were dropped. The court accepted the offer. Sentenced to life imprisonment, Karpis was an early prisoner at the recently constructed Alcatraz. He was held there from August 1936 to April 1962 and was Alcatraz's longest-serving inmate. When the institution was closed, he was moved to McNeil Island Penitentiary in Washington State, and it was there that he would encounter a young convict named Charles Manson. In his autobiography, Karpis wrote of Manson, "This kid approaches me to request music lessons. He wants to learn guitar and become a music star. Little Charlie's so lazy and shiftless, I doubt if he'll put in the time required to learn. The youngster's been in institutions all his life. His mother was a prostitute and was never around to look after him. I decided it's time someone did something for him, and to my surprise, he learns quickly. He has a pleasant voice and a pleasing personality, although he's unusually meek and mild for a convict. He never has a harsh word to say, is never even involved in an argument." After the successful lessons, Manson asked Karpis for an in at a nightclub or casino in Las Vegas, where Alvin had contacts, but Karpis declined. Manson left with the promise that he would be bigger than the Beatles. Neither Karpis nor anyone else could have imagined that Manson's fame would ultimately be derived from something much more sinister than music. Finally released in 1969, Karpis was deported to Canada. He was initially refused entry, having had his fingerprints removed by underworld physician Joseph Moran in 1934. Settling in Montreal, he wrote his memoirs in 1971, entitled Public Enemy No. 1, which he updated in 1980. The topical association with Manson garnered him much extra attention, and his book tours across Canada drew great interest. He moved to Spain in 1973. Then in 1979, his life ended in suitably mysterious fashion. Found dead with sleeping pills next to him, the situation was initially ruled a suicide, only to be reversed to natural causes after a perfunctory re-examination of the scene. Some still suspected foul play, but unlikely as this seems, it will never be confirmed, as he was buried next day without an autopsy. Regardless, he had defied the overwhelming odds of his violent life and been one of the last men standing from the time of the Depression-era outlaw.